Good evening or afternoon to those of you joining us from the US. And thank you so much for being with us here today at our panel discussion with Morocco World News. Tonight's theme is Algeria, Morocco, and whether there could be an end in sight to the long-term tensions between the two often called brotherly countries. I'm Madeline Handaji, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome our three experts to our panel this evening. First, we have Dr. Amald Cavender, who is a specialist in Middle East and North Africa studies at the George Washington University in the US. We have political analyst Hassan Masiky and our own editor-in-chief, Samir Bennis, who is a political analyst and a doctor of philosophy with expertise in foreign policy, who served with the UN for 8 years. Before we go into questions and discussion with our panel, I'm going to give you a brief sort of potted history of the relationship between Morocco and Algeria. It will be simple, and hopefully we'll be able to go into more detail with our panelists. Despite a shared history and culture that predates the colonial era, Morocco and Algeria have been in a quasi-Cold War for decades. The tensions between the two countries find their roots in the arbitrary lines drawn by colonial powers in North Africa in the 1800s, and a treaty drawn up which left a stretch of mineral-rich, unclaimed territory between Morocco and Algeria. In 1952, France claimed the territory for its own colony, Algeria, but then offered the land to Morocco as a bargaining chip to persuade the newly independent country not to intervene in Algeria's independence war. Morocco refused the offer, preferring to support its neighbor country in the independence process. Algeria's government in exile accepted Morocco's offer of help. In return, the government offered Morocco the disputed land. However, with independence, a new power emerged in Algeria in the form of President Ahmed Ben Bella, who then broke the deal. In 1963, the Sand War saw the two nations come to physical blows, resulting in a stalemate that has lasted into 2020. The intervening years have seen the borders close between the two countries and a complete freeze in diplomatic relations. Complicating matters further, Algeria continues to support the Polisario Front and its claims for independence in Western Sahara, directly questioning Morocco's sovereignty over the region. In recent weeks, Algeria-Rabat tensions have reached an all-time high, with the Algerian government accusing Morocco's consul in Oran, Algeria's second city, of being a member of Morocco's intelligence services. Hostile remarks continue to fly between Algiers and Rabat. Ambassadors have been summoned, and hopes for a rapprochement between the neighboring countries seems further away than ever. Morocco's foreign minister, Nasser Bourita, responded to the accusations of spying, calling them baseless and ridiculous. So, if we take the comments as baseless and ridiculous, our first question has to be, what is really behind the recent escalation in Algiers' hostility towards Rabat? And we'll go first to Hassan, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And in fact, you really touched on very important and very important points and historic events that really explains a lot of what's behind the Morocco-Algerian conflict. So to answer your question, Algeria is facing an existential threat right now at the Algerian regime, I would say. And it has to do with the Hirak, the protest movement has been going on now for a while. And throughout the years, since its independence in 1962, Algeria has always used Morocco, among other countries, to try to distract from its failures, socioeconomic failures, to deliver to the Algerian people. So what we see going on right now is a new government in Algiers with the same, basically, just different players, but the same policy. For people that follow Algeria throughout since its independence, are very familiar with the concept of la main étrangère, the foreign hand, and the Algerian military establishment, was the de facto really institution, the de facto leader, if you want to use that, or leaders, have used that for years. So whenever there is a problem in Algeria, political, social, they always blame foreigners, what they call the foreign hand. And Morocco has always the honor of being that one of those foreign hands, so presumably foreign hands. So in the face of all this upheaval that we've seen lately, they are turning to blaming Morocco, creating a fictional spy story to distract its own people. And this is something very common that the Algerian people have seen over and over, and the Algerian people do not believe. It worked for a while, and looking from the reaction of the average Algerian, just reading comments on the internet, they're not really not buying it. It's a small story or insignificant story, or fictional story that they're trying to make it a big deal. I happened to be watching the Algerian news 2 days ago, and it was one of their lead story. I mean, they have bigger fish to fry. They have bigger problems to deal with than story behind a Moroccan diplomat that misspoke in the heat of the moment, and now we're hearing about spy stories. So, and it's it's unfortunate that the two countries are not working together to actually address the economic issues, the COVID-19 situation. Instead, they are back and forth over a really significant story.
Thank you. That was very clear. Amal, would you like to add anything?
I agree with what Hassan said, and I think these accusations about being a spy, especially after the video, it shows the conservative approach that Algeria is having to deflect the main issue that's happening in Algeria, especially, as we said, with the Iraq movement that keeps going on. So to add a political distraction, in addition to the economic and the COVID problems that's going on now in all the countries, and the cover-up, let's say, it's not focusing very much the news on the Algerian situation. I think this is a valid argument for the military to use, especially when they are using the current President Tebboune as civil. So they are presenting it as a civilian issue, away from the military cause that used to be attached with the previous government. So I think the issue is it's beyond what is it as a political. It's more about the distraction and using this to add to the movement of people at the same time, because the civilian, the population, are not against each other. Moroccan people, Algerian people, they don't have this common animosity that's going on as the governments are dealing with. So this is to add to, like, if you, for example, for the Iraq, if you have some demands, let's add this to that. So pay attention. It's not only about the democracy; it's about this issue also with our neighbor. So it's another layer, let's say, that in this political argument.
And Samir, would you say there's a history of this distraction tactic with both Morocco and Algeria?
Yeah, thank you, Madeleine, for hosting the show. In order for us to understand why the Algerians have always used this hostile rhetoric against Morocco, to understand that we have to understand that there is a fundamental difference in the paradigm between the two countries' foreign policy. In Morocco, the monarchy is regarded as the guarantee for unity, and the king as regarded as the unifier and the symbol of unity and continuity. Therefore, the state does not need any destruction tactic to use or card to deviate the people's attention from socio-economic problems Morocco is facing. Morocco is no longer using foreign policy from this approach. Morocco now has been using foreign policy as a means to extend its influence and project power, and also build new win-win economic partnerships with its partners, whether in Africa or other parts of the world. Meanwhile, in Algeria, you have military elites whose legitimacy has been eroded over the years, and which is being regarded by the Algerian public opinion and the main cause of the social and economic problems they have been facing. So, unlike the Moroccan state, in the Algerian military is in dire need to find a foreign enemy and to use that card as destruction tactic to deviate the people's attentions from the problems they have been facing and rally their support behind the states. I would like to add to that one fundamental reason why Algerians have also refused any extended hand from Morocco over the past years to go past their differences and look forward to build a new future and to integrate their economies, is that Algerians are aware that their economy is at a disadvantage with regard to Morocco. Algerians are aware that their economy, which has relied on revenues from hydrocarbons for the past 5 decades, is weak, is not diversified, and their private sector is not as strong as Morocco. So in the events there was, and the countries came to an understanding to use the economy as stepping stone toward building a new relations. Algeria would come out as the main loser, because the Moroccan economy is much more diversified, and Moroccan products would invade Algeria's market. These are two of the main reasons that push Algerians to keep using this hostile rhetoric against Morocco. There are other reasons which I would explain later in the show.
That brings us to our next question, which is looking at the relationship between Rabat and Algiers. In recent years, Morocco's King Mohammed has called out to Algeria to sort of thaw the frost between the two countries in a number of speeches, including in his congratulatory message to President Tebboune of Algeria. Why does Algeria continue to refuse Morocco's overtures of friendship? Go first to Amald, please.
Personally, I hope this will be like objective view. I think that both sides. I blame both sides personally. I don't think King Mohammed VI was as sincere as he showed. Although I agree with Algerian stand that this is to gain the European sympathy in showing so, but at the same time, the Algerian government tried to smear every aspect that the Moroccan tried to give this the branch of olives, and didn't see any sincere or efficient or productive cooperation, or did not do against anything. But at the same time, Algeria always accused Morocco is a field of drug infiltration, and they are the ones who are presenting all this drug and hashish from the borders to Algeria, and especially with the question of Western Sahara. This is a big issue that is still Algeria of not seeing the sincere position of the king. For example, Mohammed's offer they see as a non-event, not when he declared that they didn't even send in a formal response, and they rejected the offer as like questionable. They questioned the sincerity of it, which I also at the same time, because it really plays on the European field more than on what is behind it in its sincerity. The conflict of the Western Sahara, it's a bilateral Algerian-Moroccan problem. That's what Algeria avoids to see it. It's not between Algeria and Morocco, and it's because it considers it as a decolonization issue, as they put it, and so the monarch knew that this offer would be rejected by Algeria, and it couldn't be any other way. But he tried it in any case. That's what I think.
So Hassan, would you agree that you think the offers that the offers of friendship were more of a sort of a PR move than a genuine olive branch?
No, I don't. I think that Mohammed VI's messages of friendship and of new page that been sent on several occasions to Algerian officials are really meant for the Algerian people, more than for the Algerian leadership. And I say that because everybody who knows the Algerian political system, or what the Algerian people called le pouvoir, which is basically this combination of different components of the Algerian military establishment that has been in Algeria since Ben Bella's coup d'etat, basically. When Ben Bella and Boumediene took over. And so nothing has changed in Algeria since then, really. Since Boumediene, which basically the one who became the face of the coup, since then the Algerian regime, so pouvoir, this group of organization hasn't changed. The system in Algeria has had three pillars, which is the National Army, what they call in Algeria the ANP, the DRS, which is the security agency, even though it changed name, and I think Bouteflika about 2 years ago renamed it or made some changes to it, and the FLN, which is the Front de Libération Nationale, which is the political party or the organization that led the independence. So these three pillars, these three organisms has always been the pillars, the backbone of the Algerian regime. And nothing has changed. We have different actors, but those components are the same philosophy, the same strategy, which is create problems for Morocco, make sure that the Western Sahara conflict never resolved, make sure we create as many as counterattacks for any movement by the Moroccan diplomacy. So in that sense, nothing has changed. And King Mohammed VI, the Moroccans know that, the world, France know that, the world knows that, Spain knows that, all the major, the United States, they all know that nothing has changed in Algeria. And so we don't really expect a change in the relations with Morocco. Throughout the years, we had different presidents in Algeria, but the armed forces has been the sole power there. The ANP, the DRS, and the FLN are still there, been running the country since the independence, and their political toward Morocco has been clear since the War of Sand in 1963. So in that sense, the king tries to send a message saying, we are here. If you change your mind, we are ready to turn the page. But at the same time, is a reminder to the Algerian people that we mean well, that we are ready to have serious discussion about the borders, about the Tindouf Bouchard situation, about the Western Sahara. That's really the bottom line. And if you follow the news in Algeria, it's really it's sad. It's like a joke. It's the same people moving around. I mean, look at the new president. He's been around for years. He was been around since 1991 in different ministerial jobs. There's nothing new. Look at the other major figure of the regime, Algerian regime, the General Sankreha. He is 74-year-old man who made his life, his career is countering Morocco. And here you are after that elections, he's now the chief of staff of Algerian armed forces and in interim. So nothing has changed in that sense. And so when Morocco send those messages, we know that, and they know that, but we are not going to give up. Its geography doesn't change. Algeria is next to Morocco, and that's not going to change. The Morocco is in the Western Sahara. That's not going to change. So we just hope for the best. I think Moroccans do not think Algeria is the enemy, but we think that the Algerian armed forces are not our friends. And we make that distinction very clear. And we hope for the better.
Just to go back to Amald, and then I'll come back to you, Hassan, with the same question. Do you think that there is hope for the Hirak movement? Will there be any tangible change in Algeria in the near future, or will it continue in the cycle, in your opinion?
I don't think it will be there. I mean, I don't think this will prevent any change. It's on the other hand, it's really proved to be effective, and they are persistent on that, and with their on removal of the Africa and relation of the fifth nomination for this presidency. There is hope, and I'm very hopeful about that, and they will make a big difference. At the same time, I'm not sure about how the government of Morocco would receive this, because we don't see such movement there that can make a difference. And I think that's, again, as Samir said, it's back to the quality of the authoritarian and non-authoritarian regimes. The call for democracy and listening to the people's demand, it's very important, and it's gaining a lot of influence in Algeria. And this might also influence the Moroccan people. How the king will regard that, it's really questionable, because I know, from being there and talking to people, there is one of, although we've seen some people, but they are quickly answered in just being figures there in the government or in the parliament. So I see some parallel actions, although I don't support what's going on in the military regime that's going on in Algeria, but to some extent there are some parallel of dealing with the issue, like the military, how they brought a civilian president, and although he's very much involved still in the regime, but they try to show him as different, and he is the one who is claiming people's demand. At the same time, whenever we hear about any protest in Morocco, there's a reshuffling in the government. So this also brings the question like how this also will influence the movement and the position of the king and the peoples of Morocco. So the Iraq movement is very inspiring, similar to what's going on now in DC. I see it all as under I Cannot Breathe movement, although it's not related to colors, but it's the same. People started not to breathe, and they will continue. They will want.
Hassan, same question to you, if you can remember the question.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I agree with. Yeah, I remember the question. I agree with Dr. Amald. I think it's true.
Ooh.
There are the similarities between some of the demands of the Iraq movement and some of the socio-economic problems that Morocco faced. And I have been very impressed by the protest movements in Algeria. I think the Iraq has been an example for people around the world and how to protest and demand justice and demand change and remain peaceful. Something we didn't see here don't see here in the United States. Just an example, we didn't see in France during their protest movements. So in that sense, the Algerian people have shown that they are mature, they're politically mature to protest. Their demands were clear. And like I said, their demands for better education, for better health, for jobs, for the employed. I mean, in Algeria, 30% of the population is under the age of 30, and the unemployment rate is very high. Same problem in Morocco, by the way. So would that make a change at the political level? I don't see it at this stage after the election of Tebboune. I think it's going to be a while to see a real change. I know that there have been arrests. Some of the figures of the Bouteflika regime have been arrested, major ones, and that is to appease the population. I mean, today we have the brother of Bouteflika, Said Bouteflika, brother of the former president, in jail. We have one of the most notorious names the secret services in Algeria, General Tawfiq, in jail. We have another sinister face in the history of Algerian civil war, General Tartak. Tartak is also in jail. So those are all good news for the Algerian people, good news even for Morocco, because those figures really were behind a lot of trouble, create a lot of trouble for Morocco in their support for the Polisario movement. But what we see here, it might be some changes that will be good for the Algerian people. Would it be enough to satisfy them? I don't think so. We still have the same issues with corruption, nepotism. I mean, the average age of an Algerian official is 60-something, which is ridiculous in a country like Algeria with so many talented young people. Still not opening the door for them. There's still the FLN and other institutions that are close to the military establishment are still there. They are the one who runs the show. They run the black markets. They control the import and exports. That hasn't changed. And for Morocco, definitely it's not going to change, because the fact that this latest event shows that there might be a little change that the Iraq might bring to the political life in Algeria, but it's not going to have an impact, I don't think, on the relations with Morocco. but it will continue because the Algerian people have no choice but to continue. A country rich like Algeria should not have the problems, should not have the hospitals they do. And by the way, I am not here bashing Algeria because we have the same problems in Morocco. So I'm not saying that we are better, because we're not in that sense. But Algeria is richer than Morocco. They had at one point $150 billion in hard currency reserves. And what happened to the billions of dollars? One of the questions you ask, you hear the Iraq movement asking. I was reading a newspaper about last week, and I was shocked to hear that Wahran, second largest city, they don't have drinking water all day long. I mean, we're in 2020. They don't have electricity in some parts of the Algiers. Algeria, for a long time, was a model in many aspects, and the truth to be said. And now they are really facing serious social, economic conflicts, and it's not going to get any better. But this must be addressed, because as the leaders of this trio of the FLN, APN, and DRS get older, the new generation is going to come in, and then there will be hope. But in the near future, I don't see it. In the long term, it's absolutely coming.
Thank you. That was very interesting to hear both of your perspectives on that one. We're going to move on now. You mentioned just then, Hassan, the Polisario and the long-term support that Algeria has given to the Polisario, which obviously is against the best interests of Morocco, who see the Western Sahara as part of their sovereign territory. So I want to go now to Samir and talk about what motivates Algeria to back the Polisario in the dispute, and in more tangible terms, how are they backing the Polisario in terms of foreign policy and direct backing?
Why? Well, in order to understand the reasons why, the psychological and political reasons why Algerians have provided political, economic, and financial support to the Polisario for almost 5 decades, we have to go back to the 1960s, to the Sand War, which left some indelible psychological impacts on the Algerian regime. In addition to the problem of borders between Morocco and Algeria, the borders, the eastern borders of Tindouf and Kolbashar. So these two elements have been key in pushing Algeria to be the main backer of Polisario. Why? First Algerians want to avenge the humiliation that Morocco inflicted in the Sand War in 1963. Second, Algerians have been using the Sahara card as a means to prevent Morocco from eventually turning against them and claiming sovereignty over the Tindouf, Al-Kolbashar, and surrounding areas. Here, I would like to point out that until the mid 70s, even until the latter part of 1975, Algeria was still on the surface supportive of Morocco's push to regain control of the Sahara. But behind the Sahara, Algerians were maneuvering against Morocco because they feared that Morocco would eventually, after regaining formal control of the Sahara, they would turn against them. This is one of the main reasons that explain why the Algerians have been supporting the Polisario. So now, fast forward to 2020, Algerians keep claiming that they are not a main party of the conflicts, but only an observer. This is an outright claim, if not a lie, because all evidence points to the full implication and involvement of Algeria in the conflict since day one. Algeria was the first, after Gaddafi was the first to provide the Polisario in May 1973 with weapons and support. Algeria, after Morocco regained control of the territory after the Green March in 1975, puts its full support behind the Polisario and kept its support until today. One of the main indicators that show that Algeria has a pathological obsession with the question of the Sahara is that of lobbying. If we take, for example, the question of lobbying, whether in Europe or in the United States. In Europe, Algeria is known for being the only country in the world that is providing support, monetary, political, and diplomatic support to the Polisario, and every year tries to lobby members of the European Parliament to adopt resolutions that go against Morocco. In the United States, the same applies to the United States. Algeria, over the past 45 years, had spent over $50 million in lobbying against the Moroccan stance on the conflicts and its efforts to find a mutually political solution to the conflict. If we take if we go to the filing of the U.S. Justice Department, we would see in clear terms that, for example, Folihog, the main lobbying firm that has been working on behalf of Algerian governments for the past 2 decades, for example, between April of last year and last March, that lobbying firm had 45 meetings and interactions with members of Congress, with the Senate and the House, and members of the U.S. administration. All these 45 meetings were focused exclusively on human rights and self-determination. And when we know that Algeria has been advocating the implementation of the principle of self-determination in the conflicts of the Sahara, we understand easily that that's all the lobbying efforts that Algeria has been deploying in Washington has been focused only on this topic, not even only improving its economic and or trade ties with the US or bringing investment to the US. Nothing of the sort. Only on the Sahara. I just want to point out or to wonder what other country in the world have been spending its own taxpayer money on lobbying for a cause that is not of interest to the layman in Algeria. Only country that has been doing so for the past 41 years is Algeria, which clearly shows that Algeria is a main party in the conflict. I add to that Algeria, after 11 countries opened their consulates in Laayoune and Dakhla recently, Algeria was the only country to express its disapproval of the move to issue statements against Morocco and also against the countries that opened these consulates, among them Côte d'Ivoire. So this we should just wonder what other country in the world has been doing the same. The only country is Algeria. In addition to that, now it seems also that the UN Security Council is moving progressively towards coming to terms with the fact that Algeria can no longer be regarded only as an observer state, but as a main party, which has been what Morocco has been advocating and calling for 45 years. Just for example, the last resolution adopted by the Security Council in last October mentioned Algeria 5 times, 3 times in the preamble and twice in the operative parliament. This shows that Algeria is losing momentum in its diplomatic battle against Morocco with regards to the Sahara.
Amal, would you agree that the dynamics are changing, and as Samir said, that Morocco is gaining momentum and Algeria is losing momentum?
Yes, I totally agree, because Morocco really now is getting a stronger strength. Although, as you mentioned, the opening of the general consulates of Comoros and Gambia in Dakhla and Laayoune really caused a big issue, and especially Algeria explained it or claimed it as a violation of international law. But this is the same statement that Algeria also released against Morocco after several African states withdrew recognition of the self-proclaimed Sadr, the Sahrawi Democratic Republic. So the Algerian government really losing ground because it's also they are choosing to ignore the violations that the Polisario Front is continue to commit against the UN resolution restricted areas there in the region, as they call it, liberated zones, by breakaway groups. And also the world now is able to see that the Polisario movement, although they are claiming legitimacy of presenting the Sahrawi people, the Sahrawi people themselves explain that in letters that they don't represent them, because it's also one in a letter shared with Morocco World News in November 2019. One of the former Polisario officers, Mustafa Would Sid Mouloud, he also denounced the lack of intervention from the International Committee to see that the Polisario is the Sahrawis situation especially in Tindouf, and especially when the Polisario Front is sentencing people that are trying to escape that by life imprisonment of death. So this is a big move, a big step towards the legitimization and what will be, the main issue between them. And the world is really gaining. Morocco is truly gaining support from the world, as he said. And I think with all this Iraq movement, with people's blame and with population coming together, this will gain more support internationally as well.
Hassan, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I would like to go back to the beginning of this conflict and some of the mistakes that the Moroccan diplomacy made, and they made quite few, unfortunately. And one of the number one, number two mistake, in my view, my humble view, is the fact that Morocco, to some extent, never disputed the idea, and I think Dr. Amald just mentioned that, about the fact that the Polisario is the sole and legitimate representative of the people of the Western Sahara. Morocco should have fought that since day one, because that's not the case. There are Sahrawis, thousands of them. There are more Sahrawis in the Moroccan-controlled Sahara than in Tindouf. What does make the Polisario, once they went to Algeria, settled there, made them the legitimate representative of the Sahrawi people? This question is coming back to the forefront now because of the recent wins of diplomatic successes of the Moroccan diplomacy. But at the beginning of the conflict, that was not something that the Moroccan diplomacy pushed really hard. The second mistake is the fact that Morocco did not push hard enough to have Algeria sitting at the table as the major player facing Morocco in the conflict of the Western Sahara. That it gave a lot of room for the Polisario to establish itself as the entity it is today. So Algeria, anybody who knows anything about the Western Sahara knows that that the Western Sahara conflict, it's a conflict between Morocco and Algeria over their borders. And that should have been the line that Morocco should have held all along. We're going full circle and we're coming back to it. So I don't think anybody believes that. The Algerians don't believe that. The Sahrawis don't believe that. The Polisario, the leadership, doesn't believe that. So there is nobody in the world who think Algeria is just standing by and, we're not involved. We are just one of the neighboring countries, and the Polisario is the true representative of the Sahrawi people, and this Western Sahara conflict is between us. Nobody does believe that, and Morocco fell miserably in putting that picture out, fighting this perception and trying to change this narrative, because Algeria drove the narrative for a long time until recently, and all of a sudden people are looking at it differently. But to go back to the Algeria's role, when Polisario, which by the way started as a movement in Western Sahara, but some of its leaders were in Morocco, it wasn't a bad idea. They were in a group originally that were fighting the Spanish occupation of the Western Sahara, but it was hijacked by Algeria. Many of the original leaders of the Polisario, when they left and settled in Algeria, they wanted their independent state, even though they didn't start with that idea. What the Boumediene and the military regime and the Algerian military regime of the Algerian armed forces and the DRS put that idea that it can be done. But when they moved and they settled there, as the years drag on, they knew that Algeria created this conflict and helped them because they wanted to create this quagmire for Morocco and the Western Sahara. They knew, and I'm talking about even the founder, one of the founders of the Polisario, Wally, he was one of the very few people who understood that. And by the way, he was, according to a lot of reports, killed by the Algerian military services, the DRS, even though it's never been proven. That's one of the theories out there. So when they moved to Tindouf, they realized that they are there for a long time because not the best interest of Algerian military that this conflict is resolved. And therefore, we are here, we are stuck. They have no choice, and they still don't have a choice today. I can tell you, and I had the chance to meet several Polisario leaders who are still there and sit with them, and we have discussions. I respect their views, of the like of Mouloud Said, who was representing the Polisario in Washington. We have different views, but I respect his positions. Ahmed al-Bukhari, who was also, I met at the UN on a few occasions, who represented the Polisario at the UN in past, Allah yarhamu, just about 2 years ago in Spain. And those people, you sit and you talk with them, and you can feel that they are never free to speak. They're never free to tell you what they think, because they need instructions. They need to hear from Algiers. They need to hear from the DRS. They need to hear from, ironically, Shunkrehi, who was running the Polisario and the Western Sahara within the military establishment in Algiers, who's now the new Minister of Defense. the new Chief of Staff. So I even met on one occasion Mahmoud Abdelaziz, the leader of Polisario, when he came to Washington. So, and there is always that feeling that they are not free to speak. And today that is the case. And I'm talking about the leadership now, I'm not even talking about the people, the poor refugees in Tindouf, living under the harshest conditions, in the area that nobody even talks about, not even Morocco talks about, which is unfortunate. They should spend more time talking about them. So there is no doubt in anybody's mind that Algeria is the major actor, is the engine who that controls the Western Sahara conflict. And that Western Sahara conflict, it has more to do with the Eastern Sahara between Morocco and Algeria, the Tindouf Bouchar. They are all interlinked. And in fact, It also interlinked with Ceuta and Melilla, and how Spain have helped till lately the Polisario. This is all interlinked. Keep Morocco busy, because just think about it for a minute. If tomorrow Morocco either controls the Sahara by international recognition or loses the Sahara, what's the next thing that Morocco is going to do? What's next thing the Moroccan regime, the Moroccan monarchy will do? Ceuta, Melilla, or Tindouf. So Algeria has vested interest in keeping the Sahara issue going, in keeping it unresolved, because a resolution, one way or the other, is not to the benefit of the Algerian regime.
Thank you very much, Hassan. That was really interesting and really deep analysis. Samir, do you have anything to add to that before we move on to our final question?
I think they have covered all of the aspects of the role of Algeria, and I think if I may add something to one of the main reasons that's brought us to this situation is unfortunately in the early 1960s. The Moroccan diplomacy was outmaneuvered by Spain, because if we go back to the early days of the conflicts, the only main party of the conflict since 1957, because we should keep in mind that the first country that laid claim to the Sahara was Morocco in 1957. And that was in the trusteeship council of the United Nations. So Morocco was the engine, was the main actor that brought the Sahara to the fore and pushed the United Nations to put it among the territories that should be decolonized by colonial power. At the time, Morocco was discussing the topic of the Sahara with and Sidi Ifni in the same package with Spain. But since Spain knew that the territory was rich in minerals, especially phosphates, they didn't leave any stone unturned to outnumber Morocco and delay a solution to the conflicts. And at the same time, Morocco was also negotiating with Spain the fate of Ceuta and Melilla. And the turning point in this conflict was the meeting that King Hassan II had with General Franco in Madrid airport Barajas. An agreement that ensured is called the Spirit of Barajas. By virtue of this agreement, Morocco acceded to Spain's demand to dissociate the question of Sidi Ifni from that of the Sahara. That is the core. That is the origin of the problem. Because had Morocco not accepted this dissociation between Sidi Ifni and Sahara, we should not be talking about that today.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time, so we're going to just go on to our final question. So could each of you please sum up for me if you think there is an end in sight for Algeria's Cold War with Morocco? We'll go first to Amal.
I am hopeful. Yes, there will be an end, but it needs some restructuring. I mean, it will not be easy. It will not be an easy path. The situation needs really a wise approach, not only from Morocco and to enhance their effort, but also from Algeria. Algeria, a stubborn position toward just avoiding even talking about the subject is really stalling the situation. I believe it will be an end because Algeria needs first, I believe, in the success of the Algerian people first, because the hate toward Morocco and what it represents, it's not ingrained in the peoples. It's ingrained in the military representation of Algeria. So it's only possible when this political institution changes, if there are any other social or apparatus that keeps changing this mentality that's present for the meantime. This is on political level. Second, economically, Algeria needs to be really aligning itself with political or institutions to clean up financial mess that is happening right now, especially with the bad economic conditions that's going on. Not only, I'm not talking about only Algeria, but in general, but I'm focusing for the meantime on Algeria. And it needs to open the borders with Morocco, because we know that Algerians are going to Morocco for to enjoy what's going on there, the economic living style. At the same time, this new government, although it is representing that they reshuffled and they brought new attempts in the military aspects, but brought a new opened this corruption and the commercial to them.
So I'm sorry, Amald, you're breaking up. We're losing you. I can't. I don't think we caught that last sentence. Could you repeat?
I was saying that the reforms literally did on the imprisoning the people who were in the previous government is not enough, because they allowed civilian people to get access to that corruption and economy. And so they created another class, although they are civilian now, they are not military. So unless there is a true cleanup in the financial and economic and political aspects, it's possible. And Algeria also needs to work on thinking of to the people's hand to achieve democracy. So yes, there's a lot.
We've lost you completely now, so I'm ever so sorry. We're going to move on to Hassan. Hopefully we can hear from you again in a second when you regain a bit more internet connection. Hassan.
Yes. So is there an end in sight? I'd like to be positive and be optimistic and say yes. There are a lot of people in Algeria, politicians in Algeria, that do understand the gravity of the situation and do understand the potential of opening borders with Morocco as going to benefit all. And they do understand that the Western Sahara conflict has dragged both Algeria and Morocco down. It hurt the economies. It hurt the trades. It's hurting ties between families in both sides of the borders. And I would like to mention one of my favorite politicians in Algeria. His name is Karim Tabou, and he was unfortunately in jail, and I think he's been released if I read the news lately. So people like him, young, charismatic, a leader who understands the needs of the Algerian people, of the Algerian youth, who understand that the future is an union between the two nations. We do not expect, I think Moroccans do not expect that a new government in Algeria, no matter what, if it's military, civilian, or what have you, will be just say, well, you know what, we're going to close the camps, police, you get out of here at the end of the story. And I go back to the Moroccan diplomacy and some of its shortcomings. I do not really hear about the autonomy plan for the Western Sahara, the Morocco's autonomy plan. I don't want to hear much about it, because that is the key. That's the solution. That's gonna make Algeria look good if there is to be a solution, and that is, to me, the golden egg. Morocco should bring that up to the forefront. So if tomorrow we have a civilian leader in Algeria who is ready to settle this crisis once for all, then you have that exit that will make everybody look good. And of course, you have to bring in Mauritania too, which we didn't talk much about, which has a role to a large degree. But I am sure that we'll see and not for too long. Hopefully, in our lifetimes.
Samir.
I beg to a little bit disagree with my colleagues. I don't think there is any glimmer of hope for us, at least in our lifetime, to see a real rapprochement between Morocco and Algeria. I believe that as long as the same military elite is ruling the country and controls the levels of power, of state power, there is no chance for any thaw or improvements in the relations between the two countries. If any president attempts or takes the risk to make an overture, a genuine overture to Morocco, we would risk to be assassinated. We should just take, for example, the case of Ahmed Boudiaf. Ahmed Boudiaf was asked by Algerians to come back from Morocco, where he spent 30 years, to rule Algeria and bring it to safety. But we know that Boudiaf was very close to Morocco, and one believed that question of the Sahara was a bone of contention that had to be resolved for the two countries to move forward and build a bright future for their people. Boudiaf paid the price for his closeness to Morocco. Although official narrative of Algerians say that his assassination was an isolated incident, his son, Nasser Boudiaf, made a statement in 2012 where he says that the same people who asked him to come back from Morocco killed him. The main reason was his closeness with Morocco. And he said in the statement that just before his assassination, Boudiaf has a falling out with some hierarchy members of the military who tried to convince him not to go to Morocco to attend his then upcoming son's engagement ceremony. So I believe that I don't see any insight for this unfortunate tension between Morocco and Algeria, because even if we assume that the Algerian military disappears by miracle, the people who are in the Algerian military bureaucracy have been either placed by the military or are their cronies, or are, they are close to the military. So these people have been fed the same narrative against Morocco and have been co-opted by the military, who would by no means accept to Morocco's extended hand to look past their differences and build a new page and in the two countries' relations.
Thank you. We're going to pass now to some questions from viewers. So the first question we have is from Mohammed Brahimi, who says, could our guests explain what Morocco is not doing right to isolate the Polisario? So I'm going to go first to Hassan on this one. If you'd like me to repeat the question, please.
No, I heard it. Thank you. That's a very good question. I think that for a long time, the Moroccan diplomacy has been retreating in many parts of the world, and has been counterattacking as that was their plan, reacting to actions by Algeria, and we also have had not so good diplomats stationed in some key capitals. We had some ambassadors who were not really up to the task in Washington, D.C., especially in the 80s and 90s. In Spain, we really that's a key embassy where we need ambassadors who know the conflict very well. I'm sorry to say, I've met many diplomats who did not know much about the conflict, did not know the United Nations resolutions, did not know the history. It's one thing to say, well, المغرب في صحرائه والصحراء في مغربها. That's it's very simplistic to say, well, Morocco is in its Sahara, the Sahara is in Morocco, whatever how to say it. You need to know the rule. You need to know the law behind the positions, Morocco's position, because Morocco has every right to be in the Western Sahara, and history is there to back up that claim. Moroccan diplomats don't really spend enough time reading about the history, understanding the United Nations resolutions. Also, Morocco, till lately, was completely absent in Latin America. I remember I did a little work in Mexico and with the Mexican Congress. And I went there and I was surprised. Nobody heard about Morocco. Nobody heard about the Western Sahara. Well, there is an embassy of the Sahrawi self-declared Sahrawi Republic in Mexico City for years. And even though there were different governments in Mexico throughout the years, left and right, nothing ever changed. There was a Moroccan embassy in Mexico, but no activities. Same in Central America for a long time. This is maybe for another day discuss that. But that's an example of the mistakes. In Africa, Morocco was very comfortable in French-speaking Africa. For many years, they never ventured into Nigeria, never ventured into Kenya. They were scared. And they were not even equipped to explain in English or the Moroccan positions. So there has been change, and we see the results. We're back at the African Union. Morocco now is present in Central, in Latin America, heavy presence, and so Chile closed its embassy in Algiers, but it's still open in Rabat. We need strong ambassadors. We don't need ambassadors that are chosen because of relations with such and such, the nepotism aspects of that. We need strong diplomats that speak the language, understand the local politics, understand the local customs, and be aggressive. Morocco for a long time was not aggressive, and we see it. It's happening, but we need more for it. We need to also stay present and alert in Scandinavia, which is for many years I've been writing about. Very weak presence there. So we have to keep an eye on the ball, be in the attack, because as we see, it pays.
Samir, you're frowning. Do you have anything to add?
No, I wasn't frowning. No, I completely agree with Hassan. Him and I, we have been writing about this for a long time, and we both agree that we have seen dramatic change in the way Morocco has been dealing with the conflicts over the past 6 years. And I think that turning point was 2013, when the United States presented to the Security Council draft resolution that went against Morocco's interests. And I think that was the catalyst that pushed Morocco to redouble its efforts and to widen its outreach to other parts of the world, and to go out of its comfort zone. And we have seen the results, and that explains also why Algeria has escalated its rhetoric against Morocco, because Algerians are irritated because of Morocco's forays in sub-Saharan Africa, because anybody acquainted with Morocco's foreign policy knows that for so long Morocco was focused on some West African countries, and without any effort to reach out to East African countries. Most of them have been supportive of the Polisario. The fact that Morocco was not part of the African Union did not play in Morocco's favor to reach out to these countries and to have credibility with them. But things changed after the African Union appointed former president of Mozambique, Joaquim Chissano, in June 2014 as African Union special envoy for the Sahara. That triggered the Moroccan diplomacy to move quickly and to accelerate the cadence of its efforts to protect Morocco's gains and prevent its adversaries from undoing the gain that it had achieved back then. The first indicator for that change was the speech that King Mohammed VI delivered to the United Nations in September 2014, before the General Assembly in September 2014. In that speech, King Mohammed VI took the mantle of Africa's champion and denounced the impact of colonialism on Africa and blamed it for social and economic problems it has been faced. In addition to that, Morocco started reaching out to some big nations in East Africa, such as Nigeria and Ethiopia, and not only did Morocco succeeded in pushing these countries to reconsider their position, but also in convincing them to take a position of more positive neutrality. Now, fast forward. Now, what Morocco needs to be doing is also to know that the battle of winning minds and hearts goes through search engine, through Google and big search engine optimization and through media, especially in English and Spanish, because the problem of Moroccan media, we have been focused exclusively on Arabic and French, as if we were trying to convince the Moroccan that the Sahara is Moroccan. But the people we need to convince are people in Scandinavia, in the US, in the UK, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and in Latin America. And with these countries, we need to speak their languages, and we need to provide them with objective and nuanced reports and analysis that show them in an academic and professional way that the Sahara has always belonged to Morocco, and Morocco's position is supported by historic and legal argument. That's the pending chapter that in what Morocco needs to do further in the future in order to strengthen the breakthroughs it has achieved over the past 5 to 6 years.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question from Ala Bouza, who says, what is France's position and influence in the tension between Morocco and Algeria, and who benefits from this tension? So I'm going to pass that on to Amal just for a final comment.
Morocco and France and Algeria, they were always in a very strong relation, especially after the independence and the wars. France always supported Morocco in its claims, especially with the Sahara question, which gave Morocco an upper hand in relation to Algeria. So, although Algeria was longer and a stronger hold for France as a colony, and it was just a protectorate in Morocco, but we see the French presence and the closeness of relation with the Moroccan government in relation compared to Algeria is much stronger, which is reflected on economic level, political support, and the international image of Morocco is really more gained more popularity, let's say, in Europe especially, and intensified its economic the relationship with Europe as well. So it gave this a little bit took unbalanced position between Morocco and Algeria, created this little bit big gap between the two countries, which is reflected on the animosity that we previously referred to, that Morocco gained a strong hold on an international stage that the Sahara belongs to Morocco and Algeria is losing its ground. So this is very important to recognize the big role that France is leading, especially in supporting Morocco, and it will show against like taking a position with Morocco against Algeria. This is an important step to have the Moroccan legitimacy internationally and make the case stronger.
Thank you. So we can squeeze one more question in. And so it would be appropriate to finish with the Western Sahara dossier, since it's such an important part of Algeria-Morocco dynamics. We have a question from Safa Kasraoui, who says, the Western Sahara dossier has almost disappeared from the UN briefings since the resignation of Horst Kohler, who managed to gather the parties to the conflict around roundtables talks. Will we see any new initiatives in the near future to discuss the conflict, or are we expecting further stagnation? I'll go to Samir.
Well, I think there has been some rumors in the past maybe 2 months that the former Foreign Minister of Serbia was going to be appointed as UN Secretary Personal envoy to the Sahara, but these rumors were dismissed later by the UN. Nothing has come out of these rumors. I don't have really information about what's happening behind the scene in the UN. But if we take into consideration the global context with the whole world focused on the fight of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think of course the conflict in the Sahara will be put in the back burner maybe for the coming 6 months or so. So we may not see a new personal envoy appointed maybe before later this year, because first there has been no movements with regards to the conflicts since the adoption of the last resolution in October, and the UN now, as I said, is focused on the pandemic, and Morocco is adamant that any appointments of a new envoy has to take into consideration its view. So so just to say that for the time being, I don't think that we will be seeing any new developments in this conflict, at least for the coming 6 months to a year.
Any insights from our other two panelists before we say goodnight?
Well, I think that question was up Samir's alley. He knows more about that than any of us would, I think. But what I would like to add is the status quo is good for Morocco. The status quo is good for Algeria, but it's bad for the thousands of Sahrawi refugees, defenseless refugees living in Tindouf. And it's time to put that in the forefront. The situation is untenable for them. I mean, we hear stories of social unrest in Tindouf against marches against Polisario leadership, against Algeria. And these are not for Morocco, by the way. This is all local issues, tribal issues. It is time that the United Nations faces its responsibility and help those refugees in Tindouf. Right now, this is not gonna, the status quo, as Samir said, not in the next 6 months, well, there's another 6 months to a year of thousands of civilians living under very harsh conditions. Algeria also has to face its responsibility as hosting them in its own territory. They don't have freedom of movement. They don't have. The United Nations cannot even take a census of them. So it is time to revisit that, and not necessarily on the political aspect of the conflict, but on the humanitarian aspect of it.
Thank you. Amald?
I totally agree with the last words of Hassan that he said, especially. But with my work with some activists in the Sahara, they reported that the Moroccan government is one of the players that, and maybe that's another topic for another discussion. The government is the one who is also encouraging and not preventing these, not taking census and all these. So I think back to the question, like what Morocco can do in a more official way to solve this in a diplomatic manner and make its position stronger, is really to address these problems openly and in a very democratic way, acknowledging what's going on in the as the conditions that are living there, acknowledging their problems, especially with the census problem, because this has been going for a long time, and although the Moroccan government claims that it's its territory, and they are Moroccan citizens, but they are the Sahrawis themselves. They are claiming they are discriminated against. So I think this issue needs to be brought up in a more open way to be discussed politically, socially, economically, and then to address the problem of the UN as well, and force the UN to be intervening and taking a stronger stand, as Samir said. So I think that the position of the country, it will be always related, and especially this relation between Algeria and Morocco, it will be based on and really very much delicately intertwined between these dialogues that's represented the Sahara people.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining us this evening. It's been really valuable to hear all of your thoughts on these interesting and important topics. And we hope you'll be able to join us again for another panel, perhaps on the issues that we brought up in that final question. Thank you also to our viewers for listening and for commenting and sharing your questions and opening up this debate. Good night. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madeline.
Night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, thank you.